Good morning from beautiful Brisbane, Australia, and welcome, Conscious Warriors, to another episode where we're going to share information to help us recognise what's happening in and on our internal journey, so that with this information we can begin to change what's happening for us internally. Now, today I want to present some information to you about the 7 different types of inner critic. It's information you can Google, but I also have done up some sheets for you. Now, we're going to go through not only the 7 types of inner critic, we're going to look at how we can begin to address whichever particular inner critic is happening for us. If you're here for the first time, remember to say g'day and welcome to everyone who comes along for class each morning. It's great to have you here. And remember to hit like on Facebook so you get the notifications when I go live, and on YouTube hit subscribe for the latest videos. And as of yesterday, we now have a free resource library for everybody. So you get to have all the sheets. I've just put the link in the comments. You get to have all the sheets that I use and all the research that I do for free, so that you can continue your journey. So the sheets will be up there and this video will be in the free professional resources. Good morning, Joni. Because it's important that we get to be able to be the first generation that say, okay, I can see this is what's happening for me internally. Now I can go and develop structure and strategy with somebody who understands, because I can go to a professional and say, this is where I'm at, this is what's happening, now I need you to help me work through it. Because remember, with complex trauma, it's interpersonal, all right? It happened with other people, and healing is something that happens with other people too. Now, point in case, moi, okay, me, I've reached this stage of recovery where I have that group of 3 people around me who know me inside and out. And I have another group, the next circle out is the group of people who know me, not necessarily everything, but, we have a good time. And I went, oh my goodness, I now need to expand that out and make friends with someone else. So I asked a guy at church, did he want to be friends? I said, look, I don't want to get married. I don't want to do anything, blah, blah, blah. December, January is the period of time when all the married people go off and have their families, and he was single too. And I said, just to be friends, go out. And I couldn't believe it. In the space of just being a friend, I've learned more things about myself internally. So we don't have to go into our relationship, and this is why a professional relationship helps us, because we don't have to be that close professionally, but we can have a safe space. Good morning, Kathy. But now I'm at a place where I understand that, how to make a decision about whether someone's safe, about how to take relationships slowly. And I know that I can say no. All right. So if someone's behavior isn't appropriate or healthy, or it's abusive, or red flags go up, I know I can see them, and I know I can say no, and I can walk away. So they are the sort of things that we need to be looking at as we expand our recovery journey, that we expand, letting other people into our lives as well. Don't rush out and do that if you're not at that stage, all right? I spent many years where it took me a lot of years to develop the 3 people that I let in closest to me, okay? Good morning, Nat. And it wasn't until I was solid in those first 3 relationships, years, okay, that I was then able to say, okay, now I feel that I can, take the one next step. So just take it a little bit at a time. Now, this inner critic information, actually one of our group members months ago came across it, so I'm very grateful for it. And on the sheets, you'll see the 2 professors who put it together as well. So we'll look at the 7 types of inner critic. And as we go through this morning, I want you to build this awareness internally of whether the description fits you, and it's not a bad thing if the description fits us. We turn that around, and if we get afraid, we go, okay, I'm afraid, this scares the living daylights out of me, because we don't have answers yet. Good morning, Diana. Did I say that? Anyhow, so we go, right, that fits me. Now I've got to learn how I can work with turning this around. So remember that some of this, as we go through, it'll go, oh, that's what's happening for me. And I go, okay, what do I want to do about this so I can change it around so it helps my health, so it helps me have healthier relationships. I can learn how to let people a little bit closer, all right? And also it will give us tools, all right, and language. When we have the language for what's happening, we can wrap our mind around what it is we need to know, all right? Now, with complex trauma, if you're dealing with complex trauma, or for younger people, if you're dealing with childhood developmental trauma, perfectionism can just about go hand in hand with it. Okay, and I used to be a perfectionist, absolutely, and I've shared with you before how I was such a perfectionist that in my early or late teenage, early 20s, I wouldn't talk unless I knew I was right about a subject, and I'm sure I must have driven people nuts, because it wasn't a flow of communication. It was just, well, you know, put X and Y and Z together and this is happening, and then this is, you know, bigger picture and stuff. So it wasn't about, there was no mutual communication. So, perfectionist, this is what a perfectionist looks like. This is what it may feel like inside. And ask yourself, are these the conversations I'm having with myself each day? So remember, we have 70,000 thoughts, over 70,000 thoughts a day. And the ones that are critical to catch are the ones that take away from who I am. All right. So the perfectionist critic tries to get you to do things perfectly. Also, remember, we can feel that in our heart because we wanted to be safe. All right. So if you've got that feeling in your heart that you wanted to be safe, and everything that you do, it can cause a lot of intense pressure, because either you don't start to do it because you want to do it right so you don't get in trouble, or the intense pressure as you go about doing something makes you seem really grumpy because you're doing it because of the intense pressure, okay? So the perfectionist inner critic sets high standards for the things you produce and has difficulty saying something is complete and letting it go out to represent your best work, okay? It tries to make sure that you fit in and that you will not be judged or rejected. Its expectations probably reflect those of people who have been important to you in the past. Morning, Ali. So I want you to think about that and think, are my thoughts based around producing, you know, high standards? And if it's not done perfectly, then it's not good enough. And the one thing we can do is begin to turn that around to understanding that it's part of who we are, that we like to do things well. And we have to teach ourselves that good enough is good enough, because we will have put 500% into everything that we do. So it's learning that compassion for ourselves and understanding that, okay, I may be wired that way, but I can also go gently on me. And then we teach other people to be gentle with us as well. Okay, next type of inner critic, an inner controller. So this critic tries to control your impulses, eating, drinking, sexual activity, and so on. It is work, think about work. It is polarized with an indulger addict who it fears can get out of control at any moment. So you would find that you keep pushing your emotions down and you keep believing that you should be able to handle this stress, okay? But the problem is when you keep pushing it down and down and down, it explodes into either overeating or, drinking, drugs, something to try and soothe out all that pressure that's inside of you that you haven't been able to know how to manage or how to get it out safely. All right. So, but these are things that you can learn. Okay. So it also tends to be harsh and shaming in an effort to protect you from yourself. It is motivated to try to make you a good person who is accepted and functions well in society. Now, you have to be the one that gets raw and real with yourself around this, because no one else can do that for you. We love you. You do function well in our community. But we want you to know that you're safe to start saying, I'm not managing the stress of all these emotions. Okay? And sit with somebody who will help you work through how to manage them. Okay, next inner critic, taskmaster. This critic wants you to work hard and be successful. It fears you may be mediocre or lazy and will be judged a failure if it does not push you to keep going. So think about the times when you push and push and push and push, even though you're hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. All right, that's the kind of taskmaster this inner critic is. Its pushing often activates a procrastinator or a rebel that fights against its harsh dictates. Okay, so think about that. And, speaking as a rebel with the cause, we can do that. And look, I could spend, I went through a period of 18 months where everything was about work. All right, so I definitely have to keep an eye on when that's happening and remember that I deserve to sit down and have some time out. I deserve to sit down and go, yeah, life's here to enjoy as well as the work. An underminer. This critic tries to undermine your self-confidence and self-esteem so that you won't take risks. It makes direct attacks on your self-worth so that you will stay small and not take chances where you could be hurt or rejected. It is afraid of your being too big or too visible and not being able to tolerate judgment or failure. Oh my goodness. It's a wonder. Oh, I can just see that in my life. Not that taking risks, I always take risks. Like, oh, what the heck, I've got nothing to lose. But definitely what happens if I become too visible? Oh, and the thing is, we can turn all of this around and talk to ourselves and say, change those automatic thoughts. Because remember, automatic thoughts are what will trigger us as well. On the YouTube channel, there is a video on automatic thoughts and how important it is for us to address them, to catch them and address them. So we need to work out doing our self-worth and also our sense of self. So remember, when we come up in these dysfunctional, toxic families, we haven't developed a sense of self, and it's one of the apps in our brain that we need. We need a sense of self in order that we can have the ability to say, well, no, I'm not going to tolerate that, or no, that's not for me, or I can see when other people, it's their issue and not mine, and things like that, instead of us being a people pleaser. Okay. So the destroyer inner critic, it makes pervasive attacks on our fundamental self-worth. It shames us and makes us feel inherently flawed and not entitled to basic understanding or respect. This most debilitating critic comes from early life deprivation or trauma. I want you to be assured that if this is happening for you, that every step that you take to turn this around will feel challenging, but it will be worth it, okay? You don't need to have the internal journey of being so hard on yourself that you're going to keep everybody else out, okay? We're meant to do life in community. We're wired for it. So be compassionate, but also have compassion for yourself. Be compassionate towards yourself and others, and know that if you do this work, you won't be setting out on a pathway to keep taking away from the inside of you. You want to build yourself up, Okay, and we're down to the final two. Okay, the guilt tripper. This critic is stuck in the past. It is unable to forgive you for wrongs you have done or people you have hurt. It is concerned about relationships and holds you to standards of behaviour prescribed by your community, culture, and family. It tries to protect you from repeating past mistakes by making sure you never forget or feel free. I've watched this happen in community where people try and be something and someone they're not in order to fit in. One of my oldest, dearest friends had to conform to culture, okay? Their culture was that they had to be a doctor. They didn't get the grades, so they got sent back to do their HSC again, and that's like uni entrance exam. And they still didn't get the marks to be a doctor, so they're a dentist. And it was tough to watch that this person had to conform to standards of the family, and yet they did, in between sitting the test and then resitting the test, they spent a year at uni where they did engineering and loved it, but they weren't allowed to pursue it. So we have to build this awareness of, have I taken on an inner critic voice where I believe I have to meet the expectations in community? And even in families have rules and regulations, and if we don't meet them, then oftentimes families can go, well, unless you act like we do, then you're not accepted. And oh my goodness, it's just wrong on so many levels. But we have to be the ones that go, okay, that's not for me, and I've got to do the journey. Okay, it's not an overnight transformation, it's a journey, because remember, we came up through these families. My family, on one side, their rule was if you expressed emotions or showed emotions, then it wasn't acceptable, and until you could get yourself under control, don't come back and talk to us in the family. Like, in order to talk to the family and be part of the family, you had to suppress your emotions and not talk about them. It nearly hit me like a blindside of me. I think I was 30 at the time. When I realised that that was the case, I went, oh my goodness, this is terrible. Anyhow, we can overcome this. Okay, and our last one is a conformist. So this critic tries to get you to fit into a certain mould based on standards held by society, your culture, or your family, okay? It wants you to be liked and admired and to protect you from being abandoned, shamed, or rejected. The conformist fears that the rebel or the free spirit in you would act in ways that are unacceptable. So it keeps you from being in touch with and expressing your true nature. I don't have this one. I am the rebel. But I want to encourage you that conforming does nothing to help you, okay? Conforming makes other people comfortable, but it never makes us comfortable. And I guess I'm either at that stage of my recovery journey, or life is not about making other people comfortable, okay? I can learn how to manage what I need to manage, and I want to have relationships where we sit down and communicate through the hard times. And I think this is going to sound really funny, but last night I was watching an episode of Grey's Anatomy, and two of the doctors get together, and their wedding vows were this: we promise to love each other even through the times that we hate each other, and we promise never to run away. Now, if you've got a conformist inner critic, you're going to say that people outside of your relationship and their opinion of you is more important than the person that you committed to, okay? We can't run away from this. We've got to sit down and we've got to deal with it, and we've got to be able to be with people where we can be raw and real and say, yeah, I'm really not happy at the moment, and I've got to understand it for myself in order that I can grow into a healthier place. Now, if you haven't experienced complex trauma, so we all possess an inner critic or a critical inner voice, and we experience this voice as a negative internal commentary on who we are and how we behave. So common critical inner voices include you're ugly, you're stupid, you're fat, there's something wrong with you, you're different from other people. And when that's happening, we want to take the first step is to identify your inner critic. Then we want to separate from the inner critic. Then we want to respond to the inner critic, not by being critical, but by saying, no, that's not right. This is who I am and this is where we're going. And then we don't want to act on the inner critic. So we don't want to give the inner critic any leverage to say, you have control over my life. I'm the adult here and I get to determine my one next step. And even if the one next step that we're taking into the physical world scares the living daylights out of us, that's how we rewire ourselves, because experience shows us that the inner critic doesn't get to win. Now, if you have complex trauma, childhood developmental trauma, addressing the inner critic that way won't work, okay? We've got to take it into another space. So to identify our inner critic, we need to begin to mindfully feel safe to feel and or experience our emotions, okay? Because how our brain is operating is that we're running on survival mode so much that we need to be in learning brain in order to feel safe, to feel our emotions. Then we want to feel comfortable. We want to develop this, whole arena around ourselves internally where we feel comfortable listening to our inner critic. So knowing that it's the tape that's going on repeatedly in our head, but I can feel comfortable listening to it because I'm the adult now and I get to address it, whether it's true or not. We want to understand what our inner critic is saying to us. So is it saying, hang on, I'm not feeling safe with that? Is it saying, I'm really got a level of fear here that I'm not comfortable? Is it saying, I can't do that because I don't think I can do it perfectly? We've got to build that internal awareness for ourselves because it will be different for everyone. And we know that with complex trauma, it is different for everyone. And step 4, we want to change up how we're feeling. So we want to turn our feelings and our circumstances around. We don't want to buy into what the inner critic is trying to say, and we don't want to buy into trying to get rid of negative emotions by being in inner combat with ourselves. So we don't want to have a tennis match or a slinging match going backwards and forwards about what the inner critic is saying, because then we're focusing on the inner critic. What we want to do is replace the inner critic with the opposite emotion and choose to believe that emotion despite that you can't feel the opposite emotion fully as yet. So one of the things that I grew up with in our family was cynicism, and I've been aware of it for a long time. But what I did was, and I do this often, is if there's an emotion that's negative and it's impacting my life, I Google what's the opposite. So you can use a thesaurus and look up antonyms, or you can just Google what's the opposite of cynicism or whatever else. And then I start building that feeling into my life, even if I can't believe it. So I stop the inner critic thought. And if it's cynical, especially, and I can't remember what the opposite is at the moment, I then build the opposite into my life, okay? And it works. Even if we can't feel it, we choose to believe it because we know that it will be a healthier way to live our life, okay? So there's nothing easy about turning around what's happening internally for us And for those of us who are older, it's happened for a very long time. The good news is that a clear, concise, consistent effort does produce results, okay? If it didn't, I wouldn't be here happy. Please seek out a trauma therapist, trauma coach, or a therapist, or somebody that you can trust to sit down and do this interpersonal work, because it gives you a level of the experience of safety in relationship with other people, and that's priceless, okay? And we want to be able to experience caring and kindness and compassion, and those experiences are what help us know that we can change our thoughts, change our emotions, recognize our patterns and our beliefs, and change them up. And science will agree, human connection is vital for a healthy recovery. Okay, thank you for joining in for class this morning. If you need any questions answered, please leave the questions down below and I will absolutely answer them. Remember, the link for the handouts is further up in the comments, and I will see you again tomorrow morning. And I've got some exciting stuff tomorrow and the next day. It's been a request by one of our family members, and I look forward to sharing the information with you. Bye for now.